Don't sign this.
A millionaire was about to sign a contract that would change his life forever, unaware that he was about to lose everything. Then, a poor janitor whispered a few words that would alter the course of his destiny. What happened next shocked everyone. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. Ethan Carter was seconds away from signing the biggest business deal of his entire career. Horizon Global Group had promised to take Carter Innovations to new heights, and billions were on the line. The boardroom was filled with excitement, glasses of champagne already waiting to celebrate. Just as Ethan reached for his pen, the door opened quietly. Isabella, one of the janitors, entered with her cleaning cart. "Sorry," she murmured softly. "I'll just empty the trash real quick." No one paid her any attention. Everyone was too busy congratulating themselves on what they believed was a done deal. She walked over to the bin next to Ethan's chair, pretending to adjust the trash bags. Then, leaning slightly closer, she whispered so quietly that only he could hear. "Don't sign. It's a trap." Ethan froze. His hand stopped midair, the pen slipping from his fingers and landing on the table with a faint sound. "What?" he whispered, confused. Isabella straightened up, her face calm, her eyes briefly meeting his before she looked away as if nothing had happened. She lifted the trash can, pushed her cart toward the door, and left the room like it was just another part of her routine. But Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. "Ethan?" Marcus Delgado, his longtime business partner and closest friend, leaned in with a questioning smile. "Everything all right, Mr. Carter?" another executive asked from across the table. "Are you ready to sign?" Ethan swallowed hard. The contract lay before him, untouched. The folder containing the merger details was open in front of everyone, waiting for his signature. He glanced at Marcus, then at the others, and finally toward the door, where Isabella was about to leave. The whole world suddenly felt off balance. "I need 5 minutes," he said abruptly, standing up. 5 minutes. Marcus tried to sound casual, but his tone was laced with suspicion. "Is everything okay?" "I just need to take care of something," Ethan replied, already walking toward the door. "Mr. Carter, everyone's here," another man protested. "All the terms have been reviewed, there's nothing left to discuss." 5 minutes, Ethan repeated firmly. Without waiting for a response, he stepped out and closed the door behind him. Down the hall, Isabella was pushing her cart. Hearing his quick footsteps, she stopped. "You," Ethan said sharply, pointing at her. "Come with me." She hesitated, startled, but then nodded. They walked in silence to a small break room. Ethan entered first, and she followed. He shut the door and turned to face her, his arms crossed, eyes locked on hers. "Explain," he said in a low, tense voice. "And convince me you're not completely insane for interrupting me like that." Isabella stood there, holding a trash bag in one hand. "I know how it sounds," she said quietly, "but I've overheard things, conversations no one else did. They're setting you up." "Who's they?" "Horizon and your partner, Marcus." Her voice trembled but grew steadier as she spoke. "They're using the merger contract to transfer hidden debts and disguise losses in your company. If you sign it, you'll lose everything." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Part of him wanted to laugh, but another part couldn't ignore the chill crawling up his spine. "What's your name?" "Isabella." "How long have you worked here?" 8 months, on the night shift." Ethan took a step closer, his gaze firm. "Let me be clear," he said. "If this is a lie, some conspiracy theory, or just an attempt to get attention, you're fired on the spot." Isabella bit her lip but didn't look away. "I understand," she said. "But if I stayed quiet and let you lose everything, I'd never forgive myself." Ethan turned toward the glass wall. Outside, New York City glimmered far below, but his world suddenly felt like it was cracking apart. This woman had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet she was risking it all anyway. "Do you have proof?" he asked finally, without turning around. "I do. Photos, records, screenshots. I can show you tonight, 7 o'clock, right here." He nodded slowly. "Bring everything. If you can't convince me, tomorrow will be your last day here." Isabella nodded. Ethan waited until she left, then leaned his forehead against the cool glass. Back in the conference room, the contract still lay waiting for his signature. But for the first time in his career, Ethan Carter hesitated. He re-entered the room, his heart pounding. All eyes turned toward him. Marcus was whispering with another executive but quickly straightened up when Ethan walked in. "Did you handle what you needed to?" Marcus asked with a tight smile. "Yes," Ethan replied, though he didn't sit down. He looked at the contract, then at the faces around the table. "Actually," he said calmly, "I think I'd like to review a few clauses again." "Review?" The other man frowned. "Mr. Carter, we've gone through every detail for weeks. And that's exactly why I want one final look," Ethan said, closing the folder. "Let's reschedule for tomorrow." The room went silent. Marcus stood up slowly, pressing his hands against the table. "Ethan, this doesn't make sense. We're wasting valuable time. Horizon has other interested partners." "Then let them go," Ethan replied coldly. "One night won't change anything." "It will," the executive snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "The market's unstable, this is the perfect moment." Ethan studied their faces carefully. The pressure was too much, too deliberate. Isabella had been right, something wasn't normal here. "The decision is mine," he said firmly, slipping the contract into his briefcase. "I'll see you tomorrow." Without giving them time to argue, he turned and left, leaving behind a room full of frustrated men. At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, Ethan returned to the break room. Isabella was already there, sitting nervously with a small backpack on her lap. She stood as soon as he entered. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice steadier than that morning. "Show me what you've got." Ethan sat across from her at the round table. Isabella opened her bag and pulled out her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through the photos. "It started 3 weeks ago," she began. "I was cleaning Marcus's office when I heard voices in the next room." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I recognized his voice, and a woman's. They were talking about you." Ethan leaned forward. "Go on." "Her name is Vanessa," Isabella said. "Tall, blonde, always dressed expensively." She showed him a blurry photo taken through a small gap in the door. "This is her." Ethan felt a cold shiver. Vanessa Moore, his ex-girlfriend, the woman who had left him 2 years ago claiming they wanted different things. "She and Marcus," Isabella continued, "they're together now. And they're planning something against you." She swiped to the next image and pressed play on a recording. The sound was faint but clear enough. "Once he signs, we'll have full control of the assets," a man's voice said. "Are you sure?" Ethan suspects nothing. He's too naive to see when he's being betrayed. "It was true with me, and it'll be true now." "What if he finds out?" "He won't. Trust me, Vanessa. In 48 hours, we'll own his company." Ethan ran a hand across his face, feeling the room spin. Marcus's voice was unmistakable, and Vanessa's laugh, the one he had once loved, now sounded venomous. "Is there more?" he asked, his voice rough. Isabella nodded, showing him more photos, contracts altered, transfers to unknown accounts, and discrepancies only an expert would notice. "They changed the original contract," she explained, pointing to one image. "In your copy, it says you'll keep 60% control. But in the real one, the one they plan to use, you'll only keep 20. Ethan's eyes widened. "This is document fraud. It's a crime." "And that's not all," Isabella said, showing another screenshot. "This $15 million transfer happened last week, from Horizon's account straight to Marcus Delgado's personal one." Ethan stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of New York sparkled against the night sky, but for him, everything felt dark. "Why?" he whispered to himself. "Marcus has been my best friend for 15 years. We went to college together, built everything from scratch. Sometimes people change when there's a lot of money at stake," Isabella said quietly, putting her phone away. "Or maybe they've always been that way, and you just didn't want to see it." Ethan turned toward her, still trying to process everything. "Why are you telling me this? You could lose your job." She hesitated for a moment. "Because it's the right thing to do. I can't stay silent and watch someone get betrayed like that." Ethan studied her closely. There was something more behind her words, he could feel it. But Isabella clearly wasn't ready to share it yet. "These documents," he said finally. "How can I be sure they're real?" "I understand why you don't trust me," she replied softly, slipping her phone back into her bag. "But if you sign that contract tomorrow, you'll lose everything. They've already planned every step. Ethan remained silent for a long time. Part of him didn't want to believe any of it. Marcus had been like a brother to him. But the evidence, it was too much to ignore. I need more proof, he said at last. I need to be absolutely sure. I can get more, Isabella said, her voice steady, but it'll be risky. Then be careful, Ethan told her firmly, meeting her gaze. If what you're saying is true, if Marcus really is betraying me, he couldn't finish the sentence. We'll find out the truth, Isabella said with quiet determination. After she left, Ethan stayed in the room alone, staring out the window. For the first time in 15 years of friendship, he was beginning to doubt Marcus, and that doubt was growing stronger by the minute. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual. He hadn't slept at all. All night, the images of forged contracts and Marcus's voice in that recording had played over and over in his mind. He needed answers. He went straight to human resources. Linda, he said to the HR manager, I need to see Isabella Ruiz's file. Linda Parker adjusted her glasses, clearly surprised. The janitor's file? Did something happen? Just a routine check, Ethan lied. I need to confirm a few details. Linda brought him a thin folder. Ethan opened it, and froze. Isabella Ruiz, 28 years old. Bachelor's degree in Business Administration from Columbia University. Specialization in Corporate Finance. Previous experience in business consulting at Anderson Consulting. Anderson? Ethan murmured, stunned. Excuse me? Linda leaned over curiously. It's nothing, he said quickly, closing the folder. Thank you. He left HR with his thoughts racing. Isabella had worked at Anderson, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world. How did someone with that background end up working as a janitor? During lunch, Ethan searched the building until he found her on the 12th floor, cleaning the windows of a small conference room. Isabella, he called, approaching her. We need to talk. She turned, surprised to see him. Did something happen? Did you find out more about Marcus? Actually, I found out something about you, Ethan said, crossing his arms. Columbia University. Anderson Consulting. Corporate Finance. Isabella went pale. She dropped her cloth and took a slow breath. You looked into my file. Why didn't you tell me who you really are? She looked around to make sure they were alone. Because it doesn't matter, she said bitterly. It doesn't matter how many degrees I have or where I worked before. To everyone here, I'm just the Latina cleaning lady. But Anderson, that's impressive. How did I end up here? She interrupted sharply. You want the truth? I worked at Anderson for 2 years. I was good at it. Really good. But when it came time for promotions, there was always an excuse. First, they said I needed more experience. Then they said my communication style didn't fit the company culture. She gave a dry, humorless laugh. Translation? I was too competent for my position but didn't look the part for leadership. That's discrimination, Ethan said. You could have filed a lawsuit. With what money? Isabella replied, picking up her bucket. And who would believe a Latina over a company like Anderson? Ethan fell silent, struggling to process the injustice. And your family? You mentioned a sister. Camila, she said softly. She's 22. She was born with a congenital heart defect. We need $200,000 for her surgery. When I was let go from Anderson, Isabella hesitated. Actually, when they forced me to resign, I had to take whatever job I could find. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here, she nodded. The health plan covers part of Camila's treatment, and even though the pay is low, it helps with her medication. I can't afford to be unemployed. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. Here was a brilliant woman, educated at one of the best universities in the country, working as a janitor because of prejudice and family needs. Isabella, I had no idea. Well, now you do, she said quietly, returning to the window. That's why I recognized the forged documents immediately. I spent years analyzing corporate contracts. Those discrepancies stood out right away. And that's why you warned me about the betrayal. Partly, she admitted, pausing. But also because, she hesitated, then looked at him directly. Because you're different from the other executives here. I've been watching you for months. You treat everyone with respect, no matter their role. And when I saw they were trying to destroy you the same way they ruined my career. You couldn't stay quiet. Exactly. Ethan looked at her for several long seconds. Isabella Ruiz wasn't just a janitor who happened to overhear something. She was a highly qualified professional who had uncovered a corporate fraud and had risked everything to do the right thing. Isabella, when all this is over. Ethan, a voice interrupted. They turned to see Marcus Delgado walking down the hallway, his expression sharp and suspicious. What are you doing here? Marcus asked, glancing from Ethan to Isabella. Just checking on the cleaning, Ethan said quickly. You know how particular I am. Marcus looked at Isabella, who immediately went back to wiping the glass, pretending not to hear. Since when do you personally care about the cleaning staff? Marcus asked, his tone loaded with doubt. Since I decided to start paying more attention to detail, Ethan replied with a forced smile. Speaking of which, did you reschedule the meeting with Horizon for this afternoon? Yes, at 3, Marcus said, still watching Isabella. I hope there won't be any more hesitation this time. Of course not. Ethan started toward the elevator. Let's grab lunch. I want to go over a few contract adjustments with you. Marcus followed, though not before giving Isabella one last suspicious look. Inside the elevator, he pressed the button and turned to Ethan. You've been acting strange since yesterday, he said, his tone probing. Is there something I should know about? Ethan chose his words carefully. Just pre-negotiation nerves. You know how I get before big decisions. Ethan, we've been friends for 15 years, Marcus said, placing a hand on his shoulder. If something's bothering you, you can tell me. Ethan met his best friend's eyes, searching for any hint of deceit. Marcus looked genuinely concerned. I'm fine, Ethan said finally. I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing. Of course we are, Marcus replied with a smile. This merger will make us leaders in the market. Trust me. The elevator doors slid open, and they stepped inside. But as they descended, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Isabella's words. Sometimes money changes people. And for the first time in 15 years, he began to wonder if he truly knew Marcus Delgado at all. That afternoon, Isabella was finishing up cleaning the executive restroom on the 15th floor when she heard footsteps approaching. It was almost 5. Most executives had already gone home. She frowned, wondering who was still around. Through the slightly open door, she recognized Marcus's deep voice, and a woman's. The sound made her freeze. It was Vanessa. Are you sure it's her? Vanessa asked, irritation sharp in her voice. Absolutely, Marcus replied. I checked after seeing Ethan talking to her yesterday. Isabella Ruiz, 28 years old. Former Anderson consultant. Too smart for her own good. Marcus's voice was getting closer. I checked after seeing Ethan talking to her yesterday, he said. Isabella Ruiz, 28 years old. Former Anderson consultant. Too smart for her own good. Isabella held her breath, pressing herself against the bathroom wall. Her heart pounded as she realized they were talking about her. And do you think she heard us last week? Vanessa asked, her voice sharp and tense. I'm sure of it, Marcus replied. I checked the security cameras. She was cleaning my office at the exact time we were finalizing the details. He paused. And today Ethan's acting completely different. He backed out of signing yesterday and started questioning clauses we'd already approved. Damn, Vanessa snapped, her voice rising. If Ethan finds out about us, about the money we transferred. He won't, Marcus cut her off. Not if we act fast. I need to get rid of the cleaning lady before she causes more problems. Isabella covered her mouth with both hands, fighting to keep her breathing quiet. They knew. They knew she had uncovered their plan. How? Vanessa asked. In the most humiliating way possible, Marcus said coldly. I'll accuse her of stealing in front of everyone. No one's going to believe a fired janitor over me. And if Ethan tries to defend her, well, he's been my best friend for 15 years. Even if he doubts me, he won't challenge me publicly over a cleaning lady. Marcus gave a quiet laugh. He's too predictable. Isabella closed her eyes as tears welled up. She had risked everything to warn Ethan about the betrayal, and now they were preparing to destroy her for it. When? Vanessa asked. Now, Marcus said. I'll call an emergency safety meeting in the main auditorium. She won't see it coming. Their footsteps faded down the hall. Isabella stayed hidden for several minutes, trying to regain her composure. Her hands shook as she thought of Camila, her sick sister who depended on the job's health insurance. If she was fired for cause, she'd lose not only her paycheck but also Camila's medical coverage. Moments later, the building's intercom crackled to life. All employees, please report immediately to the main auditorium for an urgent safety meeting. Repeating, all employees to the main auditorium. Isabella took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped out of the restroom. No matter what happened, she refused to let Marcus see her break. The auditorium was already packed. Employees whispered among themselves, wondering what was happening. Isabella entered quietly, keeping her head high as she stood near the back wall. Ethan sat in the front row among the executives. When their eyes met, she saw confusion in his expression. He clearly didn't know what the meeting was about. Marcus stepped onto the stage, holding a manila folder. His face was serious, almost grim. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice echoing through the microphone. "Unfortunately, I must address a serious security issue within our company." A murmur rippled through the audience. "Yesterday," Marcus continued, "we discovered that confidential documents were photographed and removed from the executive offices. This is not only a breach of contract but also a case of corporate espionage." Isabella's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what was coming. "After a detailed investigation with our security team," Marcus said, "we've identified the person responsible." He looked directly at her. "Isabella Ruiz, from the cleaning staff. Would you please come forward?" Every head turned. Isabella felt hundreds of eyes on her, some curious, others judgmental. Her legs trembled, but she walked to the front with dignity, refusing to let fear show. "Miss Ruiz," Marcus said in a cold, authoritative tone, "photos of confidential company documents were found on your phone. How do you explain that?" Isabella glanced toward Ethan. His face was a mix of disbelief and confusion. She could see the battle in his eyes. She began, but Marcus interrupted. "In addition," he said, opening the folder, "security footage shows you entering executive offices outside your scheduled cleaning hours." He handed printed photos to the front row. Ethan looked down at one, and she saw his expression twist into disappointment. "Miss Ruiz, theft of intellectual property is a federal crime," Marcus said, stepping closer. "However, given your previously clean record, we're offering termination for cause instead of pressing charges." "This isn't fair," Isabella finally said, her voice trembling but strong. "I was trying to protect." "Protect what?" Marcus interrupted sharply. "Your own interests? Planning to sell this information to our competitors?" "No. I was protecting Mr. Carter from." "Enough." Marcus slammed his fist on the podium. "I won't allow a dishonest employee to defame this company or its executives." Isabella turned to Ethan, silently begging him to speak, to defend her. But he sat frozen, his face tight with inner conflict. "Security," Marcus said. "Please escort Miss Ruiz out of the building. She is no longer permitted on the premises." "Ethan!" Isabella cried as the guards approached. "You know I was trying to help. You saw the evidence." Ethan stood slowly, and for a moment she thought he was going to defend her. But then he looked away. "I'm sorry it's come to this, Isabella," he said quietly. "But the evidence is clear." Her heart shattered. The man she had risked everything for, the one she had tried to save, was choosing to believe her betrayer. "Ethan, please," she pleaded. "You know who I really am. You know I'd never." "That's enough, Miss Ruiz," Marcus said, stepping off the stage with a cruel smile. "The act is over." The guards grabbed Isabella by the arms, but she pulled away. "I can walk myself." Her voice was steady again, even as tears streamed down her face. As she was escorted out, she stopped and turned back to Ethan. "When you find out the truth," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "remember, you had the chance to do the right thing today, and you chose not to." Ethan closed his eyes as if her words had struck him physically. Isabella walked out of Carter Innovations under the gaze of hundreds of coworkers. Some looked sorry, others looked relieved. On the sidewalk, one of the guards handed her a small box of personal belongings. "I'm sorry, Miss Ruiz," the older guard said awkwardly. "Orders are orders." Isabella nodded, took the box, and started toward the subway station. Every step felt heavier, burdened with humiliation and betrayal, but even more painful was the knowledge that Ethan was walking straight into a trap, and now she had no way to warn him. Back in the auditorium, Ethan stayed seated long after everyone else had left. Marcus came over and rested a hand on his shoulder. "I know this is difficult," he said with fake sympathy. "She seemed like a good employee. But sometimes people disappoint us." Ethan looked at him, searching for any sign of deceit. Marcus's face was perfectly calm, almost caring. "The evidence was clear," Ethan murmured under his breath. "Yes, it was," Marcus agreed smoothly. "Now we can focus on what really matters, the merger with Horizon. Our company's about to become an empire. We can't let disloyal employees ruin our dream." Ethan nodded slowly, though deep inside, a small persistent voice reminded him of Isabella's desperate honesty, the sincerity in her eyes when she begged him to believe her. "Shall we reschedule the signing for tomorrow morning?" Marcus asked. "First thing, no more delays." "Yes," Ethan said quietly, still lost in thought. "First thing." As Ethan left the auditorium, an uneasy weight settled over him. Deep down, he knew he might have just made the biggest mistake of his life. Somewhere across New York City, Isabella Ruiz walked the streets carrying a small box of her belongings, and a heart broken not by failure, but by betrayal. Yet even after all she'd lost, she was still determined to find a way to save the man who hadn't been able to save her. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The image of Isabella being escorted out of the building haunted him relentlessly, the desperation in her voice, the way she had called out his name, pleading for him to stand up for her. And he had done nothing. At 3 a.m, he finally gave up trying to rest. He got dressed, grabbed his keys, and drove to the office. The building was silent except for the faint hum of the night guards making their rounds. Ethan used his access card to take the executive elevator straight to his floor. Something about Marcus's accusations didn't add up. Isabella had shown an impressive understanding of corporate law, pointing out inconsistencies that only someone with serious financial knowledge could have noticed. Why would a woman like that risk everything just to warn him if she were really involved in corporate espionage? Ethan reached his office and turned on his computer. He decided to investigate for himself. He started with the merger files from Horizon Global Group, reviewing every document, every spreadsheet, every clause. At first, everything looked perfectly normal, but Isabella had mentioned hidden clauses. If they existed, they wouldn't be easy to find. 3 hours later, he discovered the first irregularity. On page 47 of the main contract, there was a reference to an Addendum C, something Ethan had never seen before. The note described it as a file containing technical specifications and post-merger asset distribution. But when he searched the company's digital folders, the file wasn't there. Intrigued, Ethan accessed the company's central server using his CEO credentials. He combed through layers of encrypted directories until, finally, he found what he was looking for: Addendum C, post-merger asset distribution. When he opened it, his blood ran cold. According to the document, after the merger, 80% of Carter Innovations' assets would be transferred to a subsidiary called Horizon International Holdings. Ethan had never heard of this company. As he dug deeper, he realized it was registered in the Cayman Islands, and the only 2 shareholders were Marcus Delgado and Vanessa Moore. "This can't be," Ethan whispered, reading the document 3 times just to be sure. But there it was, buried in complex legal jargon. The plan was both brilliant and ruthless. He would sign the merger believing he was keeping majority control, when in reality, he would be handing over almost everything to a shell company secretly controlled by his best friend and his ex-girlfriend. He printed the document, his pulse racing, and kept digging. Using his CEO credentials, Ethan opened the company's banking records. What he found confirmed his worst fears. In the last 2 months, several so-called preparation transfers had been made, totaling $23 million. The money was supposedly sent to Horizon Global Group, but the account numbers didn't match the ones in the official contract. Ethan traced the transactions himself. The entire $23 million had gone into a personal account under the name M. Delgado, Marcus Delgado. 15 years of friendship, Ethan muttered, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. And there was more. He found a series of emails between Marcus and Horizon executives, messages he had never been copied on. They revealed that the merger was nothing but a carefully disguised hostile takeover. Horizon Global Group wasn't even a functioning company, it was just a front for the scam Marcus and Vanessa had created. In one email dated 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had written, "Ethan is completely naive. 15 years of friendship blinded him to the possibility of betrayal. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll already have full control of the assets and be out of the country. Vanessa was right, he's too predictable." Ethan stopped reading, his hands shaking. His best friend, the man who had stood beside him through college, at his wedding, and at his mother's funeral, was planning to destroy him completely. He kept searching and uncovered even more of their scheme. After Ethan signed the contract, Marcus would announce an emergency restructuring, citing fabricated financial troubles. Ethan would be pressured to step down as CEO for the good of the company, while Marcus took full control. Then, all real assets would be quietly transferred to Horizon International Holdings, leaving Ethan with nothing but debts and legal liabilities. The plan was meticulous, almost admirable in its precision. Marcus had been plotting for months, maybe even years. Finally, Ethan discovered something else: audio files automatically saved by the company's internal security system. One of them, recorded 2 weeks earlier, made his blood boil. "Marcus, are you sure Ethan won't suspect anything?" Vanessa's voice asked. "Vanessa, I dated him for 2 years," Marcus replied. "I know all his weaknesses. Ethan trusts people too much, it's both his strength and his downfall. What if he finds out before the signing?" "He won't. But if he does, we'll use the forged documents and claim he was the one trying to commit fraud. My word against his." "You really hate him that much?" "It's not hate, it's ambition. Ethan was a good boyfriend, but too small for my dreams. With you, I can have everything I've ever wanted." Ethan stopped the recording, feeling sick to his stomach. Vanessa had told him 2 years ago that she left because they wanted different things. In truth, she had only been looking for someone with more money and fewer morals. By 6 in the morning, Ethan had enough evidence to send both Marcus and Vanessa to prison. But a painful realization hit him: Isabella had tried to save him, and he had turned his back on her when she needed him most. Her words echoed in his mind: "When you find out the truth, remember, you had the chance to do the right thing today, and you chose not to." She had been right, completely right. Now he had to fix the terrible mistake he'd made. But first, he had to make sure Marcus and Vanessa didn't realize that he knew the truth. The signing meeting was set for 9 a.m., just 3 hours away. Ethan copied every file onto a flash drive, then emailed the evidence to himself through 3 separate accounts. He cleared his browsing history and shut down the computer. As he was leaving the office, his phone rang. It was Marcus. "Ethan, I'm glad you answered," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I couldn't sleep after what happened yesterday with the cleaning lady. I know it must have shaken you up." "I'm fine," Ethan replied, forcing his voice to stay calm. "It was hard, but you were right. The evidence was clear." "I'm glad you understand," Marcus said smoothly. "So, are you ready for today's meeting? Our big moment has finally arrived." "Of course. 9 o'clock, right?" "That's right," Marcus said warmly. "And Ethan, no matter what happens in business, our friendship will always mean the most to me." Ethan closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "To me too, Marcus. To me too." When he hung up, he knew exactly what he had to do, not just to save his company, but to make things right for the brave woman who had risked everything to warn him. Isabella Ruiz had tried to save him. Now, it was his turn to save her. But first, he had to find her. And after humiliating her in front of the entire company, Ethan wasn't sure she'd even be willing to see him again. Looking out the window of his office as New York City woke beneath the morning sun, Ethan Carter prepared for the most important fight of his life, a battle not just for his company, but for his own soul. He had learned a painful truth: sometimes, the most important people in our lives are the ones brave enough to tell us what we don't want to hear. Isabella Ruiz had done exactly that. Now it was his turn to show the same courage. Ethan canceled the meeting with Horizon Global Group, claiming a family emergency. Marcus was furious, but Ethan didn't care. He had far more important things to deal with. Using HR records, he found Isabella's address, 847 Lincoln Street, apartment 2B, in Brooklyn. It was one of the city's poorer neighborhoods, home to many Latino families working long hours for low pay. Ethan had never been to that part of New York before. As he drove through the narrow streets, he couldn't help but notice how far this world was from the glass towers of Manhattan. Old brick buildings with rusted fire escapes lined the blocks. Small shops with signs in Spanish filled the corners, and children played on cracked sidewalks. He parked his BMW in front of a worn-out three-story building, the paint faded and the windows patched with tape. Climbing the creaky stairs to the second floor, he stopped in front of apartment 2B and took a deep breath before knocking. Footsteps shuffled on the other side, and the door opened just a crack, held by a safety chain. Through the gap, Ethan could see Isabella's face, her eyes red and swollen, evidence of a sleepless night. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "Isabella, I need to talk to you," Ethan said quietly. "I found out the truth about Marcus and Vanessa." "Oh, you just found out?" she scoffed, her laugh bitter. "How convenient. After you humiliated me in front of 200 people. "Please," Ethan said. "Just let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." She started to close the door, but he pressed his hand against it. "You were right about everything," he said urgently. "I found the proof, the contract, the bank transfers, the shell company, everything." Isabella hesitated but didn't open the door further. "And what do you want me to do with that now? You already fired me. You ruined my name. I've got nothing left to lose, or to gain." "Yes, you do," Ethan said. "I can clear your name. I swear I can." A weak voice called from inside the apartment, "Who is it?" Isabella sighed, glancing back toward the sound. "It's my sister. She's not well." "Please," Ethan said softly. 5 minutes. "I just want to apologize properly." She was silent for a long moment, clearly torn. Finally, she unlatched the chain and opened the door. The apartment was small but spotless, every item neatly arranged. The furniture was old but well cared for, and the walls were covered in family photos, pictures of Isabella and a younger woman smiling in happier times. "Camila," Isabella called gently. "We have a visitor." A young woman, around 22, stepped slowly into the room. She shared Isabella's delicate features and warm brown eyes, but her skin was pale, and each movement seemed to cost her effort. "Hi," Camila said faintly, offering a small smile. "You must be Isabella's boss." Ethan's chest tightened. She still thought Isabella had her job. "Former boss," Isabella corrected quickly. "Camila, this is Ethan Carter." Camila extended a frail hand. "Isabella talks about you a lot," she said kindly. "She says you're not like other bosses, you're more human." Ethan looked at Isabella, who avoided his eyes, embarrassed. "Camila, why don't you go back to your room and rest?" Isabella said softly. "The doctor said you need to save your strength." "All right." Camila turned slowly toward the hallway but paused. "It was nice meeting you, Mr. Carter. Please take care of my sister. She's the bravest person I know." When Camila disappeared into her room, Ethan turned to Isabella. "Why didn't you tell me how serious her condition is?" "I told you she needed surgery," she said, sinking onto the worn-out couch. "I didn't think I needed to go into detail." "What kind of surgery?" Isabella hesitated before answering. "A heart valve transplant. She was born with a defect, and now her valve is failing. Without the operation, her voice broke. The doctors say she might have 6 months." Ethan felt like he'd been hit. She had been carrying this burden alone, working as a janitor to keep her sister's health insurance, and he had fired her right when she needed help the most. "How much does the surgery cost?" $200,000, Isabella said, wiping away a tear. "The company's health plan covered 60%. I was saving for the rest, working extra shifts on weekends." "Isabella, I can pay," Ethan said quickly. "No," she snapped, standing up. "I don't want your pity, or your charity." "It's not pity. It's responsibility," Ethan insisted, rising to his feet as well. "I made a terrible mistake yesterday. I treated you unfairly." "You didn't just treat me unfairly," Isabella said, her voice raw with emotion. "You betrayed me. You knew who I was, that I was trying to help you, and you still said nothing while Marcus humiliated me." "I was confused," Ethan said quietly. "Torn between my best friend and a woman I barely knew." "And you chose your best friend," she said sharply. "Even when you knew he was lying." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration and shame flooding his voice. "You're right. I was cowardly and selfish. But now I know the truth, and I want to make things right. Some things can't be fixed, Ethan. She walked to the window, looking out at the street below. I lost my job, my reputation, and more importantly, I lost Camila's health coverage. All because I tried to do the right thing. Let me help, please. Why? Isabella turned to face him. Because you feel guilty? Because you want to ease your conscience? Because you're the bravest person I've ever met, he said with sudden intensity. You risked everything to save me from betrayal, and I abandoned you when you needed me most. Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Camila needs surgery in 2 weeks, she said finally. Without insurance, I'll have to pay for it myself. I don't have that kind of money. I'll pay today, Ethan said. No conditions, no favors. It's the least I can do. She gave a hollow laugh. The least you can do is leave my house, and my life. I don't trust you anymore, Ethan. You had the chance to show who you really are, and you did. Isabella. Please leave. She opened the door, her voice firm. Camila needs rest, and I need to find another job. Ethan hesitated in the doorway. This isn't over, he said quietly. I'm going to expose Marcus and Vanessa. I'll clear your name. Do whatever you want, Isabella replied without meeting his eyes. But do it without me. Ethan left with a heavy heart. As he descended the stairs, he heard the door lock behind him. Sitting in his car outside, he looked up at the modest building where Isabella and Camila were struggling to survive. He had uncovered Marcus's betrayal, but in doing so, he had lost something far more precious, the trust of the only person who had tried to save him. He knew he had to earn it back somehow. Because he was beginning to realize that Isabella Ruiz wasn't just the key to uncovering the fraud, she was becoming the most important person in his life. Over the next 3 days, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Isabella and her sister. He postponed the merger with Horizon Global Group indefinitely, claiming the need for further legal review. Marcus grew increasingly agitated, but Ethan managed to stall. Meanwhile, he searched for ways to help the Ruiz sisters without Isabella finding out. He couldn't just show up with a check, she had made it clear she wouldn't accept it. On Wednesday morning, he had an idea. He called New York General Hospital, where Camila was being treated, and managed to reach Dr. Bennett, the cardiologist handling her case. Dr. Bennett, my name is Ethan Carter, he said. I'd like to discuss Camila Ruiz's situation. Ethan adjusted his tie as he stood by the window, watching New York awaken under the soft light of dawn. This was it, the most important battle of his life. A fight not only for his company but for his own integrity. Because he had finally learned something he would never forget, sometimes, the people who truly matter are those brave enough to tell us the truth we don't want to hear. And Isabella Ruiz had done exactly that. Now it was his turn to honor her courage with his own. He called Horizon Global Group and canceled the meeting, claiming a family emergency. Marcus was furious, but Ethan didn't care. He had far more important things to do. Using HR records, he found Isabella's file and noted her sister's hospital, New York General. He dialed the number and waited until a woman's calm voice answered. I'd like to discuss Camila Ruiz's case, Ethan said. I'm sorry, sir, the receptionist replied. I can't share patient information with unauthorized individuals. I completely understand, he said gently. I'm not asking for medical details. I'd like to make an anonymous donation to cover the cost of her surgery. There was a pause. An anonymous donation? Exactly, Ethan said. $200,000. I'd like the family to believe it came from a scholarship fund or a social program, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. Mr. Carter, that's extremely generous, the woman said, surprised. May I ask what your connection is to the patient? Let's just say I owe the Ruiz family more than I can ever repay, Ethan said quietly. Can this be arranged without revealing my name? Yes, she replied. We have an anonymous donor program for cases like this. If the funds arrive today, we can schedule the surgery for next week. They will, Ethan promised. I'll transfer the money right away. That Thursday afternoon, Isabella received a call that changed everything. Miss Ruiz? Dr. Bennett's cheerful voice came through the line. I have wonderful news about Camila. Is she okay? Isabella asked, her heart pounding. She's stable, but that's not why I'm calling. We've just been approved for a federal medical aid program for severe cardiac cases. Camila's surgery will be fully covered. Isabella almost dropped the phone. What? We never applied for any program. Sometimes hospitals apply automatically for eligible patients, Dr. Bennett explained. What matters is that we can schedule her surgery for next Tuesday. When Isabella hung up, tears streamed down her face. She ran to Camila's room, where her sister lay resting. Camila, she said, gently shaking her awake. We did it. The surgery will be completely covered. Camila blinked, still groggy from medication. What do you mean? A government program, Isabella said, smiling through her tears. They're paying for everything. She hugged her sister carefully, whispering, You're going to be okay, Camila. Completely okay. Ethan later received confirmation that his anonymous donation had gone through. When Dr. Bennett called to thank him and confirm the operation, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, the quiet, pure satisfaction of doing something good without expecting anything in return. But he still hadn't earned Isabella's trust. For that, he needed a different kind of plan. That Friday night, as Ethan walked through Central Park, he remembered something she had once said, how she worked extra jobs on weekends to help pay for Camila's treatment. Maybe she was still doing that, even after being fired. He spent all of Saturday searching. He visited cafes, offices, and restaurants that hired part-time cleaning staff. Finally, around 5 in the afternoon, he found her, wiping the windows of a small accounting office on Fifth Avenue. She wore simple clothes, her hair tied in a loose ponytail. Even while cleaning, she carried herself with quiet dignity that took Ethan's breath away. He waited until she stepped outside before approaching. Isabella, he called softly. She turned, startled, and not happy to see him. Are you following me now? No, he said quickly, then sighed. Okay, yes, but not the way you think. I just heard about Camila's surgery. That it was approved through a government program. So what? She asked, her tone guarded. I'm happy for you, he said sincerely. Truly happy. Thank you, she replied curtly, starting toward the subway station. Isabella, can I talk to you? Just 5 minutes. About what? About how wrong I was. About how you were right about everything. About how I want to make things right this time. She stopped and turned to face him. Ethan, I understand that you feel guilty, but like I told you before, I don't need your pity. It's not pity, he said firmly. It's admiration. Respect. And something more that I'm still trying to understand. Something more, she repeated, frowning. You made me question everything I thought I knew about myself, Ethan said. He stepped closer, his voice low but sincere. About loyalty. About courage. About doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Ethan, please. Let me finish, he interrupted gently. You risked everything to save me from betrayal. And when it was my turn to stand up for you, I failed. But that failure showed me who I really am, and who I want to become. Isabella looked at him for a long time. And who do you want to become? She asked quietly. Someone worthy of your courage. Someone who doesn't let fear or blind loyalty stand in the way of what's right. The cold New York wind swept between them, and Isabella pulled her coat tighter. It's chilly, she said softly, glancing toward a nearby cafe. There's a coffee shop on the corner. We can talk there. The small cafe was nearly empty. They sat by the window, 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate between them. So, Isabella said, stirring her drink. What did you find out about Marcus and Vanessa? Ethan took a folder from his bag and placed it on the table. Everything. The entire plan. He opened it, showing her the documents, the shell company, the fake contracts, the wire transfers. They were planning to steal 80% of my company's assets, he said. Isabella flipped through the papers, her eyes widening. This is worse than I imagined. What are you going to do? I'm going to expose them publicly on Monday, Ethan said, leaning forward. But I need your help. My help? You still have the photos, the recordings, right? I need your evidence to complete the case. Isabella thought for a moment. And after you expose them? Then, Ethan hesitated, I want you to come back to the company. Not as a cleaner, as vice president of operations. Isabella nearly spilled her drink. Vice president? Ethan, that's insane. You're not just anything, he interrupted. You're smart, brave, and honest. Exactly what this company needs in leadership." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of his words filling the air. "Can I think about it?" she asked finally. "Of course," he said with a small smile. "But Isabella," he reached across the table, his hand almost brushing hers. "No matter what you decide about the job, I'd like to have you in my life in some way." She looked at his hand, then at his eyes. "Ethan, we come from very different worlds." "I used to think that," he said softly. "But I don't anymore. We're just two people who believe in doing what's right, even when it's hard." When they left the cafe, night had already fallen. The lights of New York shimmered like 1,000 stars reflected on glass. They walked side by side toward the subway entrance, neither in a hurry to say goodbye. "Ethan," Isabella said, stopping near the stairs. "Thank you for listening. For being different than I thought you were. And for giving me a second chance. I know I didn't deserve it." They stood beneath the streetlights, looking at each other. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes glowing in the light. "Isabella," he whispered, stepping closer. "Yes? Can I kiss you?" She hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was sweet, full of promises and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "This just made things more complicated," Isabella said softly, though her smile showed she didn't mind. "The best things in life usually are," Ethan said with a laugh. She chuckled and started down the stairs. "I'll call you tomorrow, to go over the plan for Monday. And to talk about us," he added. She turned back with a smile. "And to talk about us," she confirmed before disappearing into the subway. Ethan stood there for a long moment, gazing up at the stars over New York. For the first time in weeks, he felt at peace. On Monday, he would face Marcus and Vanessa. But this time, he wouldn't be alone. He'd have Isabella by his side, and that made all the difference. On Monday morning, Ethan arrived at the office ready to carry out their plan. He and Isabella had spent all of Sunday preparing every detail of how to expose Marcus and Vanessa. They had scheduled a board meeting for 2 o'clock, where they would finally reveal everything. Ethan placed the incriminating documents in his personal safe and prepared copies to distribute during the upcoming meeting. His nerves were tight, but his determination held firm. Isabella would arrive at noon to review the final details. At 10 o'clock sharp, the office door opened without warning. Marcus Delgado walked in, his tone icy and threatening. "Ethan, we need to talk." "Sure," Ethan replied, forcing calm. "About what?" Marcus shut the door behind him and stepped closer to the desk. "About your little late-night investigation on Friday." Ethan's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Marcus snapped. He sat in the chair across from Ethan's desk, crossing his legs with arrogant ease. "Do you think I'm stupid? That I wouldn't notice someone accessing confidential files in the middle of the night?" Ethan kept his expression neutral, though panic crawled up his spine. "I have the right to access any file in my own company." "Oh yes," Marcus said with a humorless laugh. "Your company. For now." Ethan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket and placed it on the table. "It means I know exactly what you found. I know you talked to the cleaning lady. I know you're planning to expose me this afternoon." Ethan stood abruptly. How do I know?" Marcus interrupted, smirking. "You really are more naive than I thought. You think I don't have people keeping me informed about your every move." The door opened again. Vanessa Moore entered, dressed impeccably, her beauty marred by the cold cruelty in her eyes. "Hello, Ethan," she said smoothly, walking over to Marcus and kissing his cheek. "I missed you over the weekend." "Vanessa," Ethan said, confused. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to witness your surrender." She perched on the armrest of Marcus's chair, her fingers sliding through his hair possessively. "Surrender?" Marcus smiled, unlocking his phone. "You're going to cancel that ridiculous board meeting. You're going to destroy all the evidence you've gathered. And you're going to sign the Horizon Global contract today." Ethan's voice hardened. "Are you out of your mind? After everything I discovered about you too?" "No," Marcus said, turning his phone toward him. "After what we discovered about you." On the screen were photos of Ethan entering Isabella's apartment building in Brooklyn, talking to her at a cafe, and kissing her on the street. "So what?" Ethan said sharply. There's nothing wrong with. Oh, isn't there? Vanessa interrupted, leaning forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You used internal company information to locate a former employee. Then you used company funds to pay for her sister's surgery. Ethan's stomach dropped. How do you know about the anonymous $200,000 donation? Marcus laughed. Did you really think you could move that kind of money without me finding out? That doesn't prove anything illegal, Ethan said through clenched teeth. It proves abuse of power, Vanessa countered, pulling a folder from her purse. It proves you were romantically involved with an employee who had access to sensitive information. It proves you paid her to influence a witness. Ethan snatched the folder and flipped through the papers, fake contracts, forged emails, altered bank statements. It was all fabricated to make him look guilty. This is all fake, he said angrily. Of course it is, Marcus said, standing. But who's going to believe you? A CEO who got involved with a janitor and used company money to impress her. You can't do this. Oh, we can, Vanessa said coolly, stepping closer. And we will, unless you cooperate. Ethan looked from Marcus to Vanessa, two people he had once trusted completely. Now he realized he had never truly known either of them. What do you want? I already told you, Marcus said, sitting back down. Cancel the meeting. Destroy the evidence. Sign the contract. And if I don't? Marcus tapped his phone again and showed another photo, Isabella and Camila leaving the hospital after an appointment. Then Miss Ruiz and her sick sister will find out what happens to people who stick their noses where they don't belong. Ethan's fists clenched. Don't you dare threaten them. It's not a threat, Ethan, Marcus said, his tone calm but deadly. It's a promise. I have contacts all over New York. One phone call from me, and Isabella Ruiz will never find work again. And her sister, he smiled faintly. Well, accidents happen, especially to people in fragile health. You're a monster. I'm a businessman, Marcus said, straightening his tie. And you, my old friend, are a problem that needs to be handled. Ethan turned to Vanessa. Do you really agree with this? Threatening innocent people? Vanessa laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Ethan, you were always so naive. Did you really think I left you because we weren't compatible? Didn't you? I left you because you were poor, she said bluntly. Then she smirked. Well, not poor exactly, just limited. You were building a small company, dreaming small. Marcus offered me something better. Real power. You never loved me, Ethan said quietly. I loved your potential, Vanessa replied, touching his face with mock tenderness. But when I saw that Marcus was willing to do whatever it took to succeed, while you clung to your morals, the choice was obvious. Moral principles, Marcus said, stepping closer. You built a $500 million company while chaining yourself to ethics and ideals. Just imagine what you could have achieved if you'd been a little more flexible. I don't want to achieve anything that way. And that, Vanessa said coldly, is why you'll lose everything. Because in the end, people like you always lose to people like us. Ethan looked at them, 15 years of friendship with Marcus, 2 years of love with Vanessa, and realized it had all been a lie. You have 1 hour to decide, Marcus said, checking his expensive watch. By noon, either you sign the contract or we destroy you, and everything you care about. And Isabella? Ethan asked quietly. If I cooperate, will you leave her alone? If you do as we say, Marcus replied, opening the door, then Miss Ruiz and her sister can go on living their small, insignificant lives in peace. But if you try to cross us again, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. When they left, Ethan sank into his chair. The city outside his window looked cold and alien. His phone rang, it was Isabella. Ethan, I'm arriving at the building. Is everything ready for the meeting? He closed his eyes. If he told her the truth, he'd be putting her and Camila in danger. If he lied, he'd betray her all over again. Ethan? Are you there? I'm here, he said hoarsely. About the meeting. Yes? He looked down at the folder of evidence, then at the forged documents Vanessa had left on his desk, 2 versions of the truth. One could save his company. The other could protect the woman he was beginning to love. I need to cancel it, he said finally. Cancel? Why? Legal complications. We need more time. There was silence. Ethan, are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine, he lied. Just a change of plans. All right? Talk later. Of course. When the call ended, Ethan buried his face in his hands. For the first time in his adult life, he felt utterly defeated. Marcus and Vanessa had won, and he didn't know how to fight people willing to threaten the innocent. Outside, Isabella stood on the sidewalk in front of Carter Innovations, looking up at the towering building. Something felt wrong, terribly wrong. Inside, Ethan stared at the Horizon Global contract lying on his desk. Ethan Carter sat in his office, exhausted and hollow. In just a few hours, he would sign away everything he had built, but at least Isabella and Camila would be safe. Or at least, that was what he hoped. But Isabella knew something was wrong. The sudden cancellation, Ethan's strange tone on the phone, the way he avoided her eyes when they saw each other in the lobby, all of it told her something was off. After years of working around people, she had learned how to read the signs. That night, she decided to find out the truth on her own. As a former member of the cleaning staff, she knew every corner, hallway, and entrance of Carter Innovations. At 9 o'clock that evening, with only a few night guards on duty, she used old access codes, ones that were rarely changed, to slip quietly into the building through the basement. Taking the service stairs to the executive floor, Isabella moved silently, her goal clear, to find out why Ethan had suddenly changed his mind. Inside Marcus Delgado's office, she found what she was looking for. Drawers left unlocked, papers scattered across the desk, clear signs of someone acting in a hurry. She took out her phone and began snapping photos, forged contracts with Ethan's signature, fake emails, manipulated bank transfers. But what made her blood run cold were the printed photographs of her and Camila leaving the hospital. In the margins, handwritten notes read, "Secondary target" and "Pressure point." Isabella understood immediately. Marcus had found out about Ethan's investigation, and was using her and her sister as leverage. She searched the office and found a small digital recorder hidden inside a pen holder, likely used to capture incriminating conversations. She scrolled through the audio files. There were dozens, recordings of Marcus and Vanessa planning every detail of the fraud. But one file, recorded just that afternoon, made her heart pound. It was Marcus's voice, threatening Ethan, using her and Camila as blackmail. Isabella copied every file to her phone, then left the building as quietly as she had entered. At 6 o'clock the next morning, she rang the doorbell of Ethan's apartment on the Upper West Side. Ethan answered in a bathrobe, looking pale and exhausted. "Isabella? What are you doing here so early?" "I need to talk to you," she said, her tone firm. "It's urgent." He stepped aside, letting her in, visibly uneasy. "About yesterday, there are complications you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Isabella interrupted. She pulled her phone from her purse. "I know Marcus is blackmailing you because of me." Ethan froze. "How did you?" "I heard the recording." She pressed play, and Marcus's threatening voice filled the room. When it ended, Ethan sat heavily on the couch. "Isabella, you don't understand the danger. He threatened you and your sister. I can't take that risk." "Ethan," she said, sitting beside him, "Marcus made a fatal mistake. He recorded his own threats." Ethan lifted his head, a spark of hope flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I have proof of everything," she said. "The recordings, the forged documents, the surveillance photos." She held up her phone. "We have enough to destroy them completely." "But what about the threats?" Ethan asked quietly. "If we expose them, they can't hurt us." "Not if they're behind bars," she said, taking his hands. "Trust me. We have to act today, before they realize we've uncovered their plan." Ethan studied her for a long moment, the courage in her eyes, the conviction in her voice. "What do you suggest?" "Reschedule the board meeting for today, 2 o'clock, Isabella said. She stood and began pacing. "But this time, we'll be ready for them." At 2 in the afternoon, the main auditorium of Carter Innovations was packed. The board of directors was present, along with representatives from Horizon Global Group and several senior executives. Ethan stood on stage, visibly nervous. Marcus and Vanessa sat in the front row, confident smiles on their faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, "I've called this meeting to make some important announcements about the future of Carter Innovations." Marcus gave him a knowing nod, expecting Ethan to announce the merger. First, Ethan said, I'd like to introduce our new Vice President of Operations, Isabella Ruiz. Gasps rippled through the audience as Isabella stepped onto the stage. Many recognized her as the former cleaning employee who had been fired for supposed corporate espionage. Marcus jumped to his feet. Ethan, this is absurd. You can't. Please sit down, Mr. Delgado, Ethan said firmly. You'll have your chance to speak. Isabella stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady. Good afternoon. I know many of you remember the unfortunate circumstances of my last appearance in this auditorium. She paused briefly, scanning the room. Today, I'm here to tell you the truth. She turned on the projector, and the first image appeared on the screen, the Forged Horizon Global Merger Contract. This is the version of the agreement that Mr. Carter was shown, she explained. According to this document, he would retain 65% control of the company after the merger. Then she clicked to the next slide. And this is the actual version, the one they intended to use during signing. Here, he would retain only 15% control. A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Marcus's face turned pale. This is outrageous. Vanessa stood up. These images are fake. Are they? Isabella asked coldly. Then maybe you'd prefer this. She pressed play on the sound system. Marcus's voice echoed through the auditorium. Ethan is completely naive. 15 years of friendship blinded him to the possibility of betrayal. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll have full control of the assets and be out of the country. The room went silent. All eyes turned toward Marcus. That was taken out of context, he stammered. Was it? Isabella countered, moving to the next recording. Vanessa's voice filled the room. It's not hate, it's ambition. Ethan was a good boyfriend, but he was too limited. Too small for my dreams. With you, I can have everything I've ever wanted. Vanessa's face twisted with fury. These recordings are illegal. They were obtained without consent. Actually, Isabella said coolly, they were taken from a recording device found in Mr. Delgado's office, a device used to record his own conversations. Ethan stepped forward to the microphone. There's more. He nodded to Isabella, who changed the slide again, this time showing the bank records. $23 million, Isabella said clearly, transferred from Carter Innovations accounts to Mr. Delgado's personal accounts. Money that was supposedly meant for merger preparations. Marcus stood, desperate. Ethan, we've been friends for 15 years. You're not seriously going to believe this brave woman who risked everything to save me from betrayal? Ethan interrupted. Yes, Marcus. I believe her. Because unlike you, she never lied to me. Mr. Johnson, the main representative from Horizon Global Group, rose to his feet. Mr. Carter, Horizon had no knowledge of these irregularities. We were deceived by dishonest intermediaries. I understand, Ethan replied. And I hope we can discuss a legitimate partnership in the future, on honest terms. Marcus looked around the room, but all he saw were faces filled with disgust and contempt. His polished mask of respectability had shattered. You know what, he said with a bitter laugh. I don't regret a thing, Ethan. You were always too weak to do what had to be done. Before Ethan could respond, a new voice echoed from the back of the room. Maybe you should tell that to the police. Everyone turned as Detective Harris entered, flanked by two officers. Marcus Delgado and Vanessa Moore, he announced, you are under arrest for corporate fraud, document forgery, and attempted extortion. Gasps filled the room as the detectives handcuffed them. The auditorium erupted into applause. Isabella smiled at Ethan, and he smiled back, grateful, relieved, and filled with something deeper than words could express. How did you know to come here? Ethan asked the detective, still stunned. Miss Ruiz contacted us this morning with the evidence, Detective Harris replied with a faint smile. Cases like this, with such clear proof, are a prosecutor's dream. As Marcus Delgado and Vanessa Moore were led away in handcuffs, Marcus shouted back at Ethan, this isn't over. I have lawyers. I have contacts. You had them, Ethan answered calmly. Now all you have is a jail cell. When the auditorium finally emptied, Ethan and Isabella were left standing alone on stage. "So," Isabella said with a small smile, "how was my first day as vice president?" "Unforgettable," Ethan said, pulling her into his arms. "Isabella, you saved me in every possible way." "We saved each other," she said softly, touching his face. "Together." He kissed her right there on the same stage where, just hours earlier, his life had nearly been destroyed. But now, with her in his arms, Ethan felt he was finally building something real. "And now?" Isabella asked when their kiss ended. "Now," Ethan smiled, "we have a company to rebuild, and a life to build together." Outside, the sound of police sirens faded into the distance, carrying away 15 years of false friendship and 2 years of fake love. But inside Carter Innovations, something true and beautiful was just beginning. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Isabella sat in her new office on the executive floor, reviewing the latest financial reports. Her spacious workspace overlooked the Hudson River, sunlight glinting off the water. As vice president of operations, she had already implemented reforms that were delivering impressive results. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said without looking up. "Madam Vice President, do you have a moment for your CEO?" Ethan's playful voice made her smile. "I always have time for my boss." When she looked up, Ethan was standing there holding a bouquet of red roses. "What's this?" she asked. "An apology," he said, walking toward her desk. "I know you've been working nonstop these past 2 weeks, and I haven't shown you enough appreciation for everything you've done." "Ethan, you don't have to." "I do." He handed her the flowers. "You didn't just save my company, you saved my life. You helped me see the kind of man I want to be." "You were already a good man," she said gently. "You just needed to learn to trust your instincts." Ethan smiled, checking his watch. "It's 5:30. How about we get out of here? I've got a surprise for you." They drove through the city in silence, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. Isabella tried to guess where they were going, but he wouldn't say. Finally, they stopped at Coney Island Beach. The October sun was setting over the Hudson, painting the sky in orange and pink. "What are we doing here?" Isabella asked as they walked along the sand. "Do you remember the first time we really talked?" Ethan said, stopping to face her. "In the break room, when I showed you the evidence." "Exactly. You said if you were lying, it would be your last day at the company. And you said if you stayed silent and I lost everything, you'd never forgive yourself." He took her hands. "That night, you showed me what real courage looks like." Isabella's heart began to race. There was something different in his voice, an intensity she had never heard before. "Ethan. Let me finish," he said, taking a deep breath. "All my life, I thought I knew what success meant: money, power, recognition. But when I almost lost everything, I realized none of it matters without the right person by your side." He released her hands, then knelt in the sand before her. "Isabella Ruiz," he said, voice trembling but sure, "you came into my life as a brave cleaning lady and became my savior, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life." She covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "You taught me that a person's true worth isn't in the job they have, but in the character they show." Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "You taught me that the most important people in our lives are the ones brave enough to tell us the hard truths." He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant ring that sparkled in the sunset's golden light. "Isabella, I can't imagine a future without you. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She looked at the man kneeling before her, the man who had once chosen loyalty to the wrong people, but who had grown into someone truly worthy of her love. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course, yes." Ethan stood quickly and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" she asked, laughing through her tears. "I asked Camila," he said with a grin. "Actually, I asked for her blessing first. I told her you're the most important person in her life, and that I intend to take care of both of you." "And what did you promise her?" "That I'd dedicate my life to making you happy," Ethan said, kissing her softly. "And that our family would always come first." She kissed him back, overwhelmed with joy. In the background, the waves lapped gently against the shore as the first stars appeared above New York. "I love you, Ethan Carter," she whispered. "And I love you, future Mrs. Isabella Carter." 3 months later, autumn-painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson. In their new apartment, Isabella stood before a mirror, adjusting the simple but elegant wedding dress she had chosen. "You look radiant," Camila said, entering the room. Her heart surgery had been a complete success, and she looked healthier and happier than ever. "I'm nervous," Isabella admitted with a smile. "When Ethan proposed, I was so sure. But now, on the day. Now you're realizing you're marrying the man you love," Camila said, straightening her sister's veil, "and becoming part of a beautiful family. You deserve this happiness." A few minutes later, Dr. Bennett arrived with Camila's latest test results: perfect heart function, excellent recovery. The sisters hugged, tears of relief in their eyes. An hour later, Isabella walked down the glass aisle of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden Conservatory. Lush tropical greenery surrounded the 50 guests seated among palm trees and orchids. Ethan stood at the altar, radiant with joy. When she reached him, he whispered, "You look stunning." "And you look perfect," she whispered back. Pastor Collins began the ceremony, speaking about love, courage, and second chances. When it was time for vows, Ethan spoke first. "Isabella, you came into my life whispering a truth I didn't want to hear. You taught me that real strength comes from integrity, and that true love is built on trust and respect. I promise to be worthy of your courage for the rest of our lives." Isabella wiped a tear and smiled. "Ethan, you've shown me that people really can change, that some men truly keep their promises. I promise to stand by your side as your partner in everything, through joy and through hardship." When they exchanged rings and kissed as husband and wife, the conservatory erupted in applause. At the reception, Mr. Johnson from Horizon Global Group gave a toast to the company's renewed success. In the 3 months since Isabella had become vice president, Carter Innovations had grown by 30% and secured major new partnerships. "So, what's next for the future?" asked Linda Parker from HR. Isabella glanced at Ethan, then at Camila, who was happily dancing. "Well," Isabella said with a mysterious smile, "there's actually one surprise we haven't shared with anyone yet." Ethan looked at her curiously, and she simply took his hand and whispered, "You'll find out soon." "Ethan, I'm pregnant," Isabella said softly, placing a hand on her stomach. 6 weeks. For a moment, there was silence, then it burst into pure joy. Ethan laughed, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around as everyone nearby clapped and cheered. Later that night, on the rooftop of the hotel where they were staying for their honeymoon, Ethan and Isabella stood together, gazing at the glittering lights of New York below. "From janitor and CEO to husband and wife expecting a child," Isabella said with a smile. "What an incredible journey." "The best part," Ethan murmured, kissing the top of her head, "is that our story is just beginning." She turned in his arms. "Ethan, thank you, for becoming the man I always knew you could be. And for never giving up on me." They kissed under the starlit New York sky, the city shimmering beneath them, the promise of a new life growing between them. What did you think of Ethan and Isabella's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our newest stories. And check out more inspiring tales by clicking right here at the end.